not my beat.
My guy Varun Shankar from the Washington Post, their Wizards beat reporter, joins us now. He was there last night as the Wizards took 2 in the first round. And Varun, you were the last person I talked to before I left yesterday, just before the draft started when we were doing the show live there. And I told you, Trey Johnson was my guy. And then they ultimately go and take him. So clearly I'm just clairvoyant. One, I feel like we need to just establish that with the Washington Post for the record. But two, ultimately, why do you think that, really, I think both Johnson, or actually, let's separate him first. Why do you think Trey Johnson was the pick for Will Dawkins and crew at number 6?
Yeah, we've seen a pretty clear trend with the Wizards draft picks since Dawkins and Winger took over. This is their third draft now. They have gone for players with positional size and good feel for the position. Feel is kind of this amorphous thing that I define as they don't look totally lost on the basketball court. They look like they have some level of skill. They have some spatial awareness. And I think that every player the Wizards have drafted has had some degree of that. I think with Johnson, another differentiating factor is this is one of the best shooters we've seen come out of the draft in a little bit. I mean, not only is he someone who can be a really effective catch and shoot guy, he's someone who can go off the dribble, moving off screens. He is I truly do think he is one of the best shooters we've seen in the last few drafts.
So what does that do for them? Because they haven't had a guy like this, and they also haven't drafted a guy like this. So to me, on some level, Varun, this is a fascinating experiment. And it goes back to, and again, I'm not meaning to make this about me and my takes, but this happens to be a question that I asked Will in the postseason press conference about shooting and whether shooters can be taught because they have worked so hard with guys like Bilal, guys like Alex to improve their jump shot, or if it's something that's innate. And Will basically said, we can always up their level. We can take a poor shooter to an okay shooter, okay to good, good to great, great to elite. And they've never drafted in the great category before. Now that they have, what are your expectations?
I'm going to look back on his end of season press conference because you were mostly right in what he said about the fact that you can go from bad to good. But I'm pretty sure he also noted that you actually can't teach a guy to become an elite shooter. I'm trying to pull up the transcript right now, but I think that's
exactly. He said you can go from good, if you're good, I can help make you a lot better. But there's a certain threshold that you either have it or you don't, and we can improve based off that. But the starting point is always going to be relevant.
Yeah, I think so. I think for them, they see elite shooting as a more innate trait. They think that they can turn bad shooters into above average shooters, but I don't think you could turn anybody into an exceptional shooter. I think that you saw them value that with Johnson. I think there's also other stuff. Again, positional size is something you'll see the Wizards come back to again and again. They believe it gives you versatility, it gives you some defensive upside, and maybe just as importantly, his defensive upside for a guy like Johnson, who's not right now a particularly good defender. It insulates him a little bit because it allows you some more versatility on who you can put him on during a game. He is, I think, he measured in at something like 6'4", but he's got like a 6'10" wingspan. He can guard conceivably, 1 through 3.5, I would say, depending on where you want to stash him while he's on the floor. And that can be really effective for him to be insulated in a lot of ways. Think about size can be often a sword for players. They can use it to attack defensive matchups, but it can also be a shield. It can be something that protects you and allows you to reach a certain floor on defense that you might not be able to otherwise.
Varun Shankar, Washington Post, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Will Riley, the more I hear about him, the more I get it, because I think on top of the positional size, which he certainly has, there's a competitiveness that has been a through line as well, and that seems to be the main feature of Will Riley, that he is just kind of a psycho competitor, psycho worker who's going to live in the gym. What are your impressions of Riley and why they ultimately decided on him at 21?
Yeah, I think with Riley, they were pretty impressed by his competitive nature in the pre-draft workout that he did with them. I think that they really relied more on his performance before he came to Illinois rather than what he showed at Illinois, because he showed more on-ball skills before he got to Illinois. He did a little bit at times, especially at times where Illinois was playing shorthanded. I think they liked his feel for the game. They liked the way that he had some guard skills as someone who had another late growth spurt. And so I think they saw that. They saw some shooting upside, and they decided that at that size, it was a worthy bet.
When you look at the backcourt now, there's Bub there. Obviously, Corey's still around, whether you want to consider him backcourt or more of a wing player. I'll leave that to you. Obviously, CJ McCollum is coming in, and then you have the young guys. You have Bub. You now have these two guys as draftees. How do you think the rotation plays out this year? What expectations, if you have any at this point, do you have for how they'll play the 2025 season, even if we know these picks are much further into the future?
I think you see all these guys get a decent chunk of minutes. The Wizards really have a strong belief that the best way for players to learn is by getting NBA action early, even if they're not fully ready for it. They believe that getting thrown into the fire, as Brian Keefe said multiple times last year, is the best way to gain experience and figure out where you're falling short and that there's no substitute for in-game reps. With that being said, I do think that because there's more young players now, you're going to see a little bit more competition as the team starts to jostle for these starting spots. I'm really curious in how the battle of the Johnsons, Trey and AJ, shakes out because, I think Bub Carrington is pretty firmly established as someone who's going to be a starter this year. But after that, there's a second guard spot. There's a backup guard spot. I mean, it's really going to be interesting to see who carves out the lion's share in the rotation there.
And it's also funny, Varun, is like that just doesn't even count Marcus Smart, who as a current NBA basketball player is the best one of all of those. And I think sometimes we forget that because obviously these are vets, but because they're vets, they're better players. These guys have been around. They know how to play. There's just an institutional knowledge on top of still great athleticism, even if it's not quite what it used to be, et cetera. Marcus Smart's still a really good NBA player. Chris Middleton is a health concern, but is still a useful NBA player when he's out there. CJ McCollum, his numbers are not too dissimilar to Jordan Poole's. He was averaging over 20 a game last year. So the veterans are there to mentor. They are also here to play on some level. Do you have any idea how much they will play and kind of the roles that they will play to help these rookies come along best that they can?
Yeah, I think you saw late in the season last year that the Wizards were pretty conservative with the amount of minutes they had Smart and Middleton in particular playing. There was a lot of rest days. There were a lot of days where those players might have been active. I can think of one game in Boston in particular where Smart was active but did not come into the game at all despite fans chanting for him to enter. And so, I think that will continue because, again, the Wizards are going to prioritize this long-term development above all else.
And then last but not least, NBA free agency is around the corner. Do you expect the Wizards to do, what should we expect the Wizards to do? I'll put it that open-ended way and make my journalism professors proud.
It's a pretty. I don't expect any. I don't expect any big moves from the Wizards in free agency. That's just not the way that the front office is operating at this point in time. I think they do have some space, and I think they'll use it on some players that can augment some parts of the roster or function as potential trade pieces down the line. Think about how they signed Jonas Valanciunas last year, and they didn't say it at the time, but a lot of the point of signing Jonas Valanciunas was so you could flip him at the deadline, and I think they'll do that again this year. Unclear who that player will be. This isn't based on reporting, but just kind of connecting some tea leaves. Kevon Looney is a big man who is a really good rebounder, something the Wizards really struggle with. And he was drafted while Travis Schlenk, who's now part of the Wizards front office, was in Golden State. I wouldn't be surprised if the Wizards potentially looked at him. Not sure what his market would be if he wanted to come to the Wizards, but I think that's someone that I'm keeping an eye out for.
That feels very smart. It does feel like the big man rotation has some space in it. So we shall see. Varun Shankar covered it all. Read his work, WashingtonPost.com/sports. Varun, good to see you last night, my friend, and we will talk soon.
Same to you. Talk to you later.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.